Hello everyone,
Hi.
I'm Johan Klasen from RealBiomes, and this is my good friend and co-founder Johan Storkersen. I'm really happy to be here today, we both are, and I would like to thank to the organization team and to the university and also HB who are sponsoring some parts of this. It's really cool to be able to do this, we're very happy. And with that I start. So about this talk, this is not going to be a deep technical talk where we focus on this one specific thing we solved. It's more a high-level talk where you give an overview of what it takes to create high-end open-world photorealistic natural environments. And we use a lot of proceduralism in it, and we'll give you some interesting insight into the process of making our biomes. So it's a very practical perspective, and we'll also talk a bit more about future possibilities with more proceduralism and some of the challenges that come with it. Yeah, the speakers already introduced us. A few years ago during the pandemic, we started this. And this is us sitting in northern Colombia on a wooden box. And yeah, he's steering our drone. The machete there was actually used sometimes, just on trees when we had to get some leaves off, because man, those leaves over there get really big. No pocket knife cuts it. Literally. So, our background is actually, we had some connection to the German company Crytek, who used to make CryEngine Crysis, so that got us really passionate about photorealistic worlds and high-end tech. And we really both have a passion for this, and we really try to push it always to the limit. And some of our background is based AAA game dev, but we also did some ArcWiz, some virtual production. And nowadays, everyone seems to use CG real-time visualization, so it's quite useful to have that background. Oh, whoopsie. So now we will try to play back the video, and it somehow doesn't work.
Oh shit.
So, I guess I'll just skip it.
That's a bit awkward.
Yeah.
See if we can get it to run. I mean, it would be
Yeah.
nice to show it.
We're experiencing technical difficulties. 1 second, please. Now we only have music, that's cool. Yeah, you can see here some of our environments we created. We recreated Monument Valley in the Utah desert, for example. And we also created a German pine forest. We add a lot of features. You can see the scale. We'll talk a bit more about the challenges with that. But we're mostly showing this to give an idea of what we actually make. So yeah. And usually our clients, whoever uses this, is virtual production a lot. So when they put the huge LED screens and the actors, some AAA games, some automotive, so it's quite vast. So as you can see, we basically create biomes. This means we pick one specific environment, which could be a desert, it could be a forest, it could be a mountain scale, whatever it is. We go there on a scanning trip, scan everything, and then create the procedural rules to be able to dynamically create this biome for in any kind of use case that would be necessary. So proceduralism is extremely important and core to our products, basically. So our vision for our RealBiomes is that we want to make it sure that everyone can use it, especially since there's so many new industries popping up for real-time use cases. It's often people who are not super technical or not super familiar with CG concepts, because maybe they were using just more design programs like Adobe Suite or any tools like that. So for them it's really cool that it's easy to use, and proceduralism really fits for that, because you can just tell people, okay, just generate it like this, and you don't have to manually go in and know all the technical details. So we try to make it really easy, and proceduralism is really good for that. We try to cover all the scales. Johan will talk about that. We use real data. We use SubBiomes. All of that we're going to talk about a bit more now. And of course, all of our biomes are fully featured, meaning that we have wind interactivity, we have seasons, and all of that is always procedurally based, because that just makes sure that we can produce a lot of content, and the procedural tag makes sure that it's all consistent and working. And with that, I give over to Johan.
So why do we go procedural? So the vision for us is to have a one-click solution. Basically, we want to have give users the ability to create everything with a single click of a button. So landscapes then get scattered with SubBiome masks, which then has used procedural systems to scatter the assets. It allows for unprecedented scale. Obviously, this is one of the most core features of proceduralism. You can see our packs are absolutely massive. I mean, we have 64 square kilometers for the desert. And imagine scattering this manually, that would not really be feasible. Massive worlds and consistent detail. I mean, this is also a very core aspect. Everywhere you look, it's the same. Everywhere has the same quality. Everywhere has the same density. Very time efficient, obviously. That's why we're all here. We all want to save time. And this is really, this saved us so much time. Like, imagine creating these worlds without proceduralism wouldn't be possible. It's also beginner friendly to the extent that once we have a proper framework set up for everyone to use that they can actually look at, they can adjust it to their own doing. This will be much easier than, for example, just giving someone the assets and telling them to scatter them manually using the tools in the engine, which, you know, a lot of people, like Jan said, did from industries that maybe don't have the experience necessary to really do this properly. So concretely, procedurals in RealBiomes. Partly, we use procedurals for asset creation, but this is something that we're actively working on. Our plans is to have a fully procedural asset pipeline, possibly using, Houdini maybe, you never know. For the most part so far, concretely, it's been procedurals for asset placement, as obviously this helps us a lot. Part of it is runtime using GPU scatter. And part of it is baked. And the reason why we bake certain elements is because we want to also retain some of the art directability, which means we want to give people the ability to also adjust the procedural generation a bit to their own liking, because it's difficult to get exactly what you want with proceduralism sometimes. So I mean, in terms of advantages, for us it's been absolutely huge. Saved tons of times. Consistency is also super important for us, because we want to, no matter where you look in the world, even if it's a 200 square kilometer map, we want you to be able to see the same details, the same consistency throughout the entirety of the level. It helps us iterate faster because we can do changes, and all of this propagates throughout the entire level almost instantly. So it helps us to really also improve the general procedural, like visually at least. Lower barrier of entry, I mean, similar to what I mentioned with more beginner friendly. Not a lot of people have experience or skills to necessarily create these worlds without a procedural framework in place. And modularity and expansion possibilities. We have, this basically means, we can combine elements like SubBiomes and combine products together, put them on top of each other, or blend them together all in one map, for example. So that you could, for example, have a transition between like a desert and then a forest, and all of these could be like individual biome product. So obviously some of the disadvantages with proceduralism is the lack of art directability. This is a big focus for us. Personally, I'm an artist, so I really like to be able to go in and tweak and adjust things a bit to my liking. And like proceduralism isn't always the most easy to get the correct results. As it can look quite generic and repetitive. This is part of the reason why we have SubBiomes as well, to really help us kind of break up the repetitiveness, and also helps us with creating the large example maps that we ship to our clients. As otherwise, just having one simple forest, that wouldn't be much fun. You need to have all the different elements, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Oh, wait, that's wrong. Asset requirements is another big challenge. As the guy who often creates the assets, I often find myself being a little bit stuck. Using the procedural systems have a lot of limitations in a sense. So you have to adapt the asset to be procedurally scattered using that specific system. Which means that I might have to do very strange things on the actual asset, like really expand the base or add additional elements to it that allows it to be easier to scatter procedurally using the systems available to us. It doesn't really work all that well for large scale composition, things like cliffs, mountains. There are certain assets that are very difficult to scatter procedurally because either they represent a very specific shape or because you need to obviously integrate everything with the landscape properly, which isn't always easy. But of course, this depends on the technology that you have available to you. And there's a lot of weirdness that can happen, of course. We have all seen it. I mean, sometimes the rocks that just stick out of the landscape for no good reason. Sometimes you see misplaced things here and there, but that's kind of part of the process, let's say. So one of our biggest challenges was millimeter to kilometer. This is always kind of what we told ourselves, because we don't only care about the details, we also care about the scale. This is really where we ran into a lot of issues developing RealBiomes. This, for example, what you see here is a 64 square kilometer map. It's absolutely massive. And every area, like you can see in that picture, every area is equally detailed. And that requires a strong procedural system to do this efficiently. Like Jan said, we have a lot of different clients as well. So use cases vary a lot. Like it has to look good and perform well from all angles, whether you want to be a bird flying through the sky or a plane, whatever, or a dog running through the desert. I mean, we want to be able to make sure that it works and runs properly. Yeah, this is just a quick video that kind of showcases the scale. So yeah, that's the for you, Jan. SubBiomes. Bring it home.
Thanks, Johan. So I'll have a quick talk about SubBiomes. So for us, it's very important to not have this. We have had already seen this in some talks, that it can often just randomly scattering can look boring, and proceduralism can in some cases look a bit generic. So what we try to do is we bring in a concept called SubBiomes, because if you look at a forest in the real world, it doesn't look the same everywhere. It depends how's the humidity, how much light is exposed, how's the ground composed. All these things matter. If there's a big tree growing there, maybe underneath the light doesn't reach the plants, so it's different kinds of plants living. There's so many variabilities. And with each year, of course, things get more complex and we can model more and more. The way we tackle this right now, we use something called BiomePainter, and with the BiomePainter, you can paint up to 6 subbiomes. For example, here you have the humidity modeled. The most wettest biome will be the mossy, then it will be mixed, and then finally dry. You can see that the dry one doesn't have much moss going on, not many blueberries, because the ground is drier and it gives more of a brown feel. So there's two advantages. You model the real-world biological reality of it, where you say, okay, this is how it would actually grow. And on the other hand, you also get a lot of art directability, because you can say, hey, get me more brown in there. So we get a combination of both of those things with subbiomes. And then, of course, you also have dead areas. For example, in Germany, many of our forests who are spruce are actually mostly dead because there's a parasite. So you can even model that and just paint a lot of dead subbiome because the Borkenkäfer has killed most of the trees. And similarly for grassy and border, there's applications for everything. And all of this, the way it works, Johan will demonstrate in a moment, you will basically just go in and just paint. Okay, here I want it to be grassy. Then there, I want more of a dead area, and then you just click generate, bam, it's done. Of course, you can also just extract that information from satellite maps, and you can just mask it anyway. Okay, here I know there's grass, there I know there's trees, here's dead areas, and you can just input those as splat maps, whatever you prefer. So yeah, with that, I give over to Johan.
All right, let's see if we can get this working. All right, cool. So the idea here is basically just to quickly import individual splat maps. These can be generated wherever, world machine, world creator, Gaia. Just a quick example on how we just can manually paint the subbiomes, or like I said, initially importing them already finished. Then we're going to go ahead and generate the foliage volume, and that's pretty much it. It's very quick. Generates everything on the spot like this. Can jump in game, can inspect everything. Yeah. And we're going to go ahead and paint some other subbiomes as well here. See, just paint another layer and regenerate, and everything changes, both the ground and also the foliage scatter, or rather the larger things like trees and rocks. It takes a second to generate sometimes, but yeah, very basic level example, but I think hopefully you get the idea. So here are just some quick shots that kind of showcases the compositional elements. We always start off with just the landscape. We then, let's see if we can go to the next one. Yeah, we then basically do the splat maps. The splat maps then drive which foliage gets placed where. We generate everything with a few final tweaks. And yeah, I mean, this is the same for our desert, as you can see. And yeah, here are some of the final results. I mean, pretty convincing, I would say, right? And bring it home.
All right, yeah, thanks, Johan. So there's always work to do, and in the future, there's always the question. I mean, some people have talked about this. For example, in the presentation from Turbulent, they talked about it, that there's always this question, what do you do runtime in engine, and what do you do externally in tools like Houdini? So one possibility in the future could be Unreal Engine has a new system called PCG. It's still very early in progress. I think some people here are already trying it. I talked to them, it was very interesting. And we don't use it currently because it's still a bit too early. It doesn't have any GPU scattering, and yeah, try scattering 500 million instances with a CPU. That's going to be fun, I promise. And currently it's still, even compared to other systems, a bit slow with larger worlds, with high instance counts, which is extremely important to us. As Johan said, we have a 64 square kilometer map for a desert with so many assets. But it also is a lot more complex. It's a bit like a light version of Houdini inside Unreal, and it being integrated with things like instancing has a lot of advantages. So it could be very interesting for us in the future. We're still seeing how that will develop. And the other possible way forward would be relying a lot more on Houdini and working with things like the Houdini plugin and trying to have a lot more customizability in an organic look, because the real world doesn't have any instances. The real world isn't, oh, we have 15 trees and we're going to distribute them. No, every tree grows differently depending on the light, depending on the structure. So if you could model that, that would be amazing. Right now, technically, it's not really possible because of things like instancing, but it's still something we're experimenting with, we're looking at, we'll see how things develop, and it could be a really interesting way forward. Besides from that, we still want to integrate more procedural workflows into it to just make it even more easier for people to create their own things, because we know so many people are coming into real-time visualization, and the lower the barrier of entry, the more people can create. So with proceduralism, that's a huge game changer for that. And of course, we have to talk about AI. It's 2024. So we've had a bunch of super interesting AI talks, and you can imagine that there's a lot of interesting things that can be done there. For example, extracting procedural rules from real-world data. There was someone of you guys I talked to who told me about a foliage creator who actually takes a simple lidar scan and then from that extracts rule for procedural foliage creation. That's very interesting. For example, things like that are going to keep happening. AI develops extremely fast, like we just saw with the super cool presentation about AI text. And things like Gaussian nerves are happening, which for scanning, which we do heavily, extremely heavily, also going to be very interesting where that will lead us. And yeah, so I'm very excited to see where things go. For us, what this means is this planet is extremely big, and there's so many different biomes, and we're aiming to cover all of them step by step. And This also means we, as Johan said, looking at our pipeline, making it more procedural. It's already procedural in parts, but we want to see which knobs we can turn to make it even more efficient. And it also means new technologies to make even bigger worlds, more complex things. And Houdini is extremely interesting for us in that context, like for everyone. I was asking how many side of X people are there. I think they said 10 to 20. So it's, of course, extremely important, and we'll see where that goes. And yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free. You can join our Discord server, write us an email. We're super happy to connect with people, very thankful and happy to be here. And yeah, if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Hey, thank you for that beautiful presentation. I wanted to ask, when you start to painting and SubBiomes, the individual or small asset, how do you handle like their placement logic and the collision between the assets?
So for anything that's very small, say small bushes, small twigs, we just skip collision completely because it's not relevant. For anything that's big, it just deletes every instance that was placed in the area regenerating and places a new one.
And in terms of that initial placement logic, is it generated on the fly or is it baked from something?
It's baked. Like for anything that has collision, it's baked. For anything that doesn't have collision, it's on the fly.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hello. So from a performance aspect, you did mention it a bit that you do, from millimeter to kilometer, but could you talk more about it? How do you handle exactly? Because there's a lot of detail and a lot of really small models. Do you mostly let Unreal do the work of keeping performance high, or do you also do some optimization like unloading really small assets and greater distances, or does Unreal just do that for you?
All right, yeah, it's a very good question. Performance is always a very fun topic for us. We enjoy spending time on that at the end, especially with quickly developing technology. It's extremely complex. Before we had a lot pipeline, and now it's nanite. We still maintain the old lot pipeline, but it's basically two very different paradigms. And what you said, it's ideally, of course, the engine would just handle it, and anything just gets cold. Okay, the small rock, you're 500 meters away, you're not going to see it, it gets cold away. So for those simple cases, it works very well in engine, but there are some cases that are more complex, especially when it comes to foliage, to alpha, to overdraw, where you have to create custom solutions, very smart tricks, sometimes even hacky solutions, because if you want the highest possible quality, you have to do everything, and there's not always the most elegant solution. But usually it's the edge cases.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Great talk and some really beautiful work that you're presenting there. I'm personally very interested in real-time foliage and CG trees, and I'm curious if you can speak to that at all and how you've created the foliage in your scenes, and if there are any particular challenges that you feel are kind of still unsolved when making plants.
Was that a question about, sorry, I didn't hear you that well. Was it about foliage in general, like how that's created, or?
Yeah, how do you create the foliage, and what are the kind of challenges that are maybe unsolved in creating foliage right now?
Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting question. This is something that's kind of in flux right now. We're looking to change that. But just concretely speaking, products that you've seen now, they were created by hand. A lot of challenges with that. I mean, the thing is, when you do things by hand and the complexity goes up, for example, we started using nanite, right? And now suddenly we can make 5 million triangle trees or 10 million triangles, but doing that by hand, it's not really ideal. So we're looking at, procedural solutions for this. That's really the primary reason. Yeah.
That's the final question. Could you end up? Yes, hello. Could you elaborate a bit more on how you guys scattered the cliffs? Because they seem to really fit nicely every slope type and how big it is. Do you guys do something of how much space there is to scatter a cliff mesh?
All right, so the cliff scattering would indeed be a great case where you can just say, okay, you can measure the angle, the distance between the highest and the local low point, and based on that, you can place it. I have to admit that particular shot you said, that's something we hand placed because we noticed we didn't get quite the result we wanted, but we want to get a really nice shot. So I have to admit that this one we did place by hand with a spline, basically. We have a spline tool that allows that. But it's also something that we're looking at, and it's interesting because maybe I can take this to make a point. This is a really good question. It's always, we often ask, okay, what else can we make procedural? In theory, we can make everything procedural probably, but also how much time is it going to cost you to make this and how much? If we have 8 cliffs to place, we can place them a day with a spline, or can take 1 month and create a procedure solution. The question is, it's always like a cost-benefit factor. And in this case, we just said, no, let's just leave it splines. Everyone loves splines, right? I mean, am I alone? Right, yeah. That's it, yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Johan.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.